Hey guys, we're back, brand new take aim, and this week we have my good buddy Blake Garrett on. Once again, Blake just killed another just awesome deer, Missouri deer in the 160s, and it's a heck of a story. All dating back exactly 1 year ago, same deer, same tree stand. So you guys don't want to miss this episode. A lot of good takeaways as always, a lot to learn, and just truly a unique story, and it's one of those once in a lifetime things that us hunters know can only happen to guys that hunt. But it's really cool. I hope you guys enjoy the show. All right, boys and girls, we're live, brand new take aim. Excited to be back, and excited to have Blake Garrett back on with which I kind of know a little bit of the backstory, but it's going to be an awesome story, and super pumped as always to talk to Blake. So Blake, what's up?
What's up, man?
Nothing, man. So excited to have you here, and like kudos. Like I think 2 weeks ago I was like, well, I'm pretty sure I'll have Blake back on shortly, and
yeah,
that didn't take long.
Yeah, I wasn't, you know how it is. I mean, you don't really plan for it, but it worked out well, and I've been kind of lucky to get in front of two good ones in the last 2 weeks, so I'll take it, you know.
Heck yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things, like, we got to obviously talk about the backstory, but I think me and you talked offline about it, not on a podcast anywhere, but we talked about, like, your encounter with that deer last year, so let's start with that and just kind of share with everybody what happened.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, and that deer. We started feeding that farm specifically last May, and he just showed up, and he was an older deer. Thought he was 5. I mean, we knew he was at least 5. I always kind of struggle with aging beyond 5, really, here in Missouri, because it's just so tough. And he was kind of a weird body type. He's short, kind of a short-bodied deer, but always really pudgy. And we knew he was 5 at least, and knew he was mature. But for him to be a non-resident deer, we really don't know 100%. But yeah, he just showed up, and we thought initially, man, like through May and June, we thought he was going to be a giant. Like he just started off fast and had a bunch of points going, kind of everywhere. And we were like, man, he's going to be really, really big. And then as he got through growth, he just didn't really put on any mass, didn't get real wide, just a tight rack deer. He had a lot of points and a lot of junk, but just didn't really do the mass that we were needing like we want our mature deer to do. So really, I mean, he was a coal deer. He was a deer that I was like, man, I'm going to try to kill him and get him out of here. He was a big brood. He ran everything off the feeder in the summer, and really that's why he was targeted last year. And we had a couple of really good young deer that we wanted to stick around. So he really became kind of, my focus for Missouri to get him killed before the rut, so I could at least probably have a chance of my younger bucks, hanging around. And just kind of, we fed him about, I don't know, I'd say a quarter mile or so. It's the same farm, but it just has a draw on the west end of it, and that's where we feed because it's easy to access it. And he ate there all summer, and then we shut feed off in August here in Missouri, and he went hard horn, of course, and disappeared, and picked him up in the middle of the farm on the middle draw that's, like I say, a quarter mile away. And he was just running things in there. He was all over the place. He daylighted, I think, 3 or 4 times there the first week of October from the 5th all the way through, like, the 12th. And to go in, we have a spot in there to hunt that's, you just got to have a north wind because it's kind of what we set up our early season stuff for north instead of, a lot of guys do south and southeast and stuff. But we do it because we're only going to hunt early on a cold front. So we really set them up for cold front. So it's a north wind, and had to wait on him. I think we pulled pictures like the 5th or 7th or something like that, and had him daylighting in there, but I had to wait a couple days just till I got north to hunt him. And went in on the north, first sit in Missouri the entire year. He showed up early, like I think sunset was like 7:05, or I'm sorry, shooting light was like 7:05, and he showed up at like 6. So he showed up 30 minutes before sunset even, and put on a great show. I think we have like 15 minutes of video of him within 20 yards. He worked a tree that was like the size of a soccer ball right in front of us, and then walked another buck off and came back, worked the tree again, and then walked down at 14 yards. Pretty steep angle, but 14 yards, and I stopped him, shot him. Initially thought, I didn't get much penetration. My first reaction was, man, I don't know what happened, but that did not penetrate like I thought it would. And he ran off, and of course, we gave him 3 hours before we went and looked, and kind of one of those things where, you hit a deer, if you hit a deer back or you hit a deer badly, time is your friend. In this situation, it's a 50-50 shot. Either the arrow got in there and did enough damage that he's going to be dead within 200 yards, or it didn't get in there and the deer's going to live. We pretty much knew it was one of the two. And so we gave him 3 hours, went in, started the track, and really, honestly, the first, I'm going to say, 100 yards of the track looked great. Found the arrow at about, I don't know, I'd say 30 or 50 yards from the track, and I noticed the arrow when we found it had about 4.5 inches of penetration, and the broadhead was closed. It was expandable with a rubber band around it, like a front deploy broadhead. It was closed, and the rubber band was still on it, and I was like, wow, this is super weird. So I slide the rubber band back, and I can't even pry the blades open with my fingers. So that worried us. But we had lung blood that was actually spraying. I mean, down the trail, you only had one hole, but it was spraying on some of the trees and some of the taller vegetation. And so we thought, man, I think we got him. So we kept following it, and just the blood just kind of died out. It went another, I'd say we probably tracked him 500, 600 yards. And this is over the course of, it took us another 3 hours. So by the time we got to the end of the blood trail where it really stopped, we had been in it for 6 hours from the time of the shot. And there was just one draw that led up. It was probably 200-yard long draw that just ended in this field. So I was like, well, I'm just going to walk up this draw. This is where he's got to be if he's in here. And this is at night. And I walk up, and I jump him at like 20 yards, and he runs off. And I'm like, geez. Oh, yeah, I mean, that feeling is just horrible. So I we just get out of there. We get everything together, get out. And it's like the worst of the worst. When you wound a deer, it's the absolute lowest low, and it's the absolute worst thing that can happen. And just a long night, and then I spent the whole next day walking, grid searching kind of the area that he ran to. Spent the other next 2 days after that doing the same thing and really just walking the farm out. At this point, just kind of walking everything. I think 3 days after I shot him, I checked a camera that was up on that end and actually got a picture of him the day after I shot him at like noon, walking by that camera. So
yeah,
he had.
And where was that camera at compared with like where you hit him and where you were looking at for him?
The camera was honestly like it was probably right in between where I shot him and where I jumped it.
No way.
Just kind of crazy. He went right back through that same area and came into the farm. So he was, walking into the farm. And I was actually there that day, and I was up, where he had run. I was up there grid searching. It was a giant bean field, and I was up there kind of grid searching that area looking for him. So he had actually come around me that day and walked down through the timber and walked underneath one of our sets and by the camera, and it's crazy. But so I after finding that, I was like, well, I think he's going to live, so we ran cameras hard in there to try to just get pictures of him for confirmation of life, to know that, he was going to make it through. And literally, I think we ran, it's about an 850 acre piece of timber or a piece of property. And we probably had 15 to 20 cameras on it the entire year. So this was October 14th. So all through the rut, all the way through January, and we never got another picture of him. Not a night picture, not any, nothing, not a picture of him. So I'm thinking he's dead 100%. So shed season rolls around. We just do body searches. We walk every inch of cover, everything that we can walk, and spend probably a week and a half doing that, and don't find him. And it's just a big question mark for us pretty much all winter. And then May rolls around. We fill the feeders back up for the spring right after turkey gets over, and he shows up on camera. And I'm like, unbelievable. Like, you can literally see in the first pictures of him, you can see the scar from where the arrow hit him.
That arrow.
Yeah. And he's healthy. Like, he's a fat deer anyway, but he's just healthy and fat and already got, probably 6 inches of antler going. So I'm thinking, well, he's probably not going to do, he's probably going to be the same deer, or he's going to be weird on one side. You know how it is when they get injured. So we start just pouring.
Yeah, usually that rack gets screwed up pretty bad.
Yeah, absolutely, with those injuries. So we just start pouring the feed to him, and we're mixing, Shock Effect, the C-Cal in it, and Antler Maximizer, and then we're feeding Big Time, the Protein Plus, and we're just dumping food to him. I mean, just always keeping food in front of him. And he's a hog, and he's just there all through antler growth. So the entire antler growth, he comes through, and he starts throwing on a lot more inches. I think I don't know, I can't say 100% what he scored last year. I'm going to say he was probably 145 inches at best with all the junk that he had, all the extra points, because I think I want to say he had 17 or 18 scorables last year. And but frame wise, he's 130 inch deer, but he's just got all this extra crap that's going on. So this year, we grew him up, and he ate like no other. Ran the feeder, pretty much ran everything off. Same stuff, Blew into 160. I think we scored him at 160 inches, and he broke off about a 4.5 inch tine this week. The week that I killed him. Yeah, so he was probably 164, 165 inch deer this year. So he jumped at least, 15 to 20 inches conservatively after being wounded last year. But it was unreal. So anyway, we go through
and a year older, like his upper end age.
Yeah.
Like he's
on the upper end too. Yeah, like
6 or 7.
Yeah. 6 to 7, yeah, he's somewhere in that range, 6 to 7, 5 to 6. He made that jump somewhere in there. I definitely think on the low end this year he was 6, but he definitely, could have been 7 or 8. But yeah, to make that jump even from 5 to 6 is pretty rare, especially for us here. I mean, usually we average like an 8 to 12 inch jump that time, for that jump, so the age gap, but. We go through, and it's really the same situation. We feed him through. We shut it off in August. He goes hard horn. He disappears. So immediately I'm thinking, hey, let's get back to that timber where I shot him, where he showed up in October. And we get cameras in there, and he shows up October 5th on the same scrape that we picked him up on the first time last year, in the daylight, too. Yeah, in the daylight. So I'm like, holy moly, he is, moved back in.
Like after, I know you mentioned turkey season, so right after turkey season, had he, totally committed that he would, had relocated, was living on that farm for the summer?
Yeah, after he found the food, so that's where we got the first pictures of him. He just stayed. He was irregular. He was there every 2 days at least. He didn't daylight as much. Last year he daylighted almost every other day on the feeder in the summer. This year he didn't. He would be a lot middle of the night. He would he was a little bit less prevalent, or I guess not there as much as what he was last year. He definitely, you could tell he changed something. It may have just been the age. It may have been, I don't know. He just changed that, and that was something that I was kind of my heart was set on I got to try to kill this deer, to try to finish this out off. But I was kind of hesitant because of that. It just wasn't a shoe-in, if that makes sense.
Right.
So we went through, lost him till October, picked him up there the 5th, and then this year I didn't get a north to hunt there until October 15th, which is a day after I wounded him a year ago. And so we get it, and we go in, and pretty slow hunting back there this time of the year anyway. It's just those deer really moving there in the rut. I mean, it's really what that spot's set up for, and pretty slow. I think we got in there real early. We got in there at like 3:30 just because it's a pretty long hike, and set till, gosh, I would say 6:30 at least. And he had a couple does come through, and that was it. And I was sitting there waiting. Shooting light was like 7:04, I think 7:03, and it was like 6:55, and he kept hearing something behind us, and I honestly thought it was a squirrel. I mean, we had some squirrels back there messing around, and all of a sudden I just turn around, and he's at like 15 yards walking dead behind the tree, right in our downwind, essentially. So we turn, it's just kind of mass chaos, but Josh gets the camera on him, and I draw the bow and kind of lean around the tree and have to watch out because my bag's hanging right there by it, and get around it, and he stops. He hit where we walked in, and he stopped and smelled, and then picked his head up and looked right at us. He was 12 yards, and I freaking shot him and dumped him, and man, he ran about 100 and fell over. It was just unbelievable. I said it in the Kansas thing too, with that Kansas buck and what we had with it. Like 30 seconds before he showed up, I would have absolutely bet you my life that we weren't going to kill that deer or see that deer that night.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of one of those just pop right out on you kind of things. But so we stroked him, and you got to go, put our hands on him, and I think honestly he obviously was a lot bigger rack-wise, but even body-wise, he was super, like, sway-backed, almost like an old horse is, just really swayed back and just really fed up and healthy and fat. And, you couldn't tell the deer had been wounded here before, like, at all. He was completely healthy.
Yeah, speaking of that real quick, like, I have a couple things I wanted to ask you, but one thing is, right away last year when you ended up shooting them and you found that arrow, I mean, was that confirmation right away that you had like a legit broadhead failure, Blake, or did you kind of like ponder that question to yourself for a little bit?
I didn't. I mean, I think at the track time I was like there's so many things going through your brain after you shoot a deer, and the tracking, and you're trying to read the track and what's going on with it and what he's doing and if the blood's good. And, there's so much that I don't really think at the point that I picked up the broadhead, I was more like, this is weird, but I've got good blood, so maybe it's okay.
Confusing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was just confusing, and you could tell what happened with the broadhead. It wasn't the fact of a lot of the guys think, and I even thought, like a broadhead's all about like expandable, especially as like how it deploys, right? And if it's going to catch and open and all that stuff, and it wasn't so much. I think that fell on the broadhead. I think what happened is I had gone in right behind the shoulder and actually touched the shoulder blade at the top end of it. And I think it hit a rib just straight on, and it kind of bent that ferrule. And with it bending that ferrule, it bent the blades in place while they were locked in the channels.
Okay.
And it just bent them into the channels to where they couldn't flip open.
There was no room for them to get out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, penetration-wise, the arrow actually went into the cavity, but it went in as almost a field tip.
For sure.
And if you watch the video in slow motion, I posted the real-time video of it today, and when you watch it in slow motion, the arrow's in, and then it just pulls right back out, and then it holds right at that cavity, right at those ribs where it went through. And So when he takes his first bound, or second bound, it's already pulled all the way out to the head of it. So it looks like, when you watch it in real time, you think it just didn't punch through.
Right.
But when we
actually went in and worked itself right back out after he moved his shoulder.
Right, correct. It just went straight in and popped right back out. Which I've seen broadheads do that before. I've seen a lot of times where you'll hit in and you'll go in and you'll hit the opposite shoulder and then it'll bounce back out and it looks like you didn't get as much penetration as you actually did. And that's what happened with it. But the problem was that it just went in as a field tip, and there's nothing to cut on it. Even the tip of the broadhead was smashed flat and angled to like one side. So it had actually gone in, and there was just nothing sharp to do any damage other than just poke. It was like I poked his lung with a pencil up that front end. You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
So it just didn't cause enough blood and enough, it probably popped. Well, I mean, I know it deflated the lung, but I don't know enough about deer lungs or lungs in general to know if if you pop the front of the lung, if the back of the lung doesn't work. I don't know that.
Right.
I don't know if it deflated the entire lung or not.
Did you notice it this year when you ended up field dressing them?
Yeah, so it was just super weird. Like when I blew through both lungs whenever I shot him the second time, and so when I was gutting him, it was kind of it was kind of hard to tell, what damage is old and what was new. But I do know that, and this is going to get kind of gruesome, but if you gut a deer, you understand that when you cut through and you reach in to like grab the esophagus to pull everything out. As I reached in, there was loose, it was long, but it was loose, and it was almost like ground hamburger, but it was super fatty. Like, how deer fat gets on your hands, and it gets on your knives and stuff, and it's like super, super fatty.
Can't even get it off almost.
Yeah, you can almost get it off. This stuff was like you had ground hamburger in there, but it wasn't soft. It was like really, like you could feel the crumbles of it.
Griddle almost.
Fat. Yeah, like griddle almost, and it was fatty, and it was that lung. And it was almost like it had, so what happened whenever we got him out and opened him up, and that lung had collapsed, and it had fused to the inside of his rib cage on that side, and then it had fused to the bottom of his rib in his brisket area. It had fused all down in there too. And it wasn't, it was super weird. It wasn't like scar tissue. It wasn't like pus. It was almost like a really gritty, like sausage almost. But I think that was just part of that lung that had broke down and probably some of the blood material and
stuff.
For
sure.
But,
yeah.
The other part of the lung had actually, turned black and had like fused to the rib cage. So it was like it was stuck to the rib cage on that side.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's super crazy, that a deer could live through that, and that's how he heals, and that's how his body does it. But it was unbelievable, and if anything, it was an eye-opening experience to me. I always heard about guys, John Massey was the first guy I ever heard about, who John killed like a 214-inch deer in Kansas, just a giant. And he had to shoot the deer. I mean, when he shot him the first time, he stroked him. And went back like an hour, and the deer was alive. And he shot him again. The deer jumped up and ran again, and then John ended up killing him. But come to find out, when John cut him open, he had the same thing. He had a fused lung, and when he shot him the first time, it just got a little bit of the second lung and went through that old lung. And that's why the deer hadn't expired. He was, still alive. And that was really the first time I ever heard of a deer actually living being healthy
and living like that with one lung.
Yeah, like you heard, you've always heard guys with steep angles or shooting straight down that got one lung and that's it, but they never know if the deer lived or died or what. They just didn't find it. But yeah, that was really the first time that I'd heard of it, so I knew it was possible, but I didn't. I guess I just never imagined it would happen to me, and to be able to really kill that deer within a year later, and at the same spot. It's just unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. I know you mentioned, which I want to hit on a little bit, Blake, is
that spot you're at, describe it a little more. So I know you said it was basically like a spot that you had set up for a rut spot. So was it really in the timber? Was it high on top? Was it low? And
Yeah. So
is it just basically in a spot where deer kind of basically make their way from a bedding area, I take it, from maybe a couple 100 yards away that allows you to sneak in that close to the bedding?
Yeah, so it's essentially the top. We have some elevation. It's not crazy. It's probably 60 feet, but the top is crops. And so you come in from the top, and then you'll go in the timber probably 60 yards. There's a logging road that goes down, but you go in 60 yards, and it's a bluff, and the bluff drops off and goes into a bottom. And this tree sits right on that bluff. So you're 20 foot high, but you're actually, from where I shot him, I was probably 35 foot high because he's down in the bottom.
Because of that bluff going down.
Yeah, and the way the bottom runs is it's got a creek in it, but it's got a bowl that goes around. So the bluff kind of comes around that bowl, and we hinge cut that bowl out like 3 years ago. So we went down in that bottom and we hinge cut some trees down there. So it always grows up with tall grass, and then it's got trees, and then obviously the creek's right off of it. And this bluff just sets up. So it's essentially just a spot that those deer always scrape right on the edge of that bluff as it comes around. And then they go up right in the corner of the bowl to go to food in the evenings. And it just is always a good spot in the rut because those bucks, it's a way for those bucks to get around that bedding area because they'll walk the bottom of that bluff, and they'll be able to, with a north wind or a west wind, they'll be able to win that whole bedding area by walking those scrape lines around the edge of the bluff. So it's just kind of a way to pop in on them and sit over and watch that, and you can get that movement around that, plus you're just in a doe bedding area anyway, which is always good, during the rut. But yeah, that's all it is. And what he had done is just moved in there to control that area for the rut. And he threw me a curveball with coming behind us because, honestly, he came – I almost think he was bedded up on the bluff, just on down a little bit more, probably eating acorns is what I would guess. Because there's really nothing up top as far as crops go now. I mean, most of the corn's out. There's some standing beans, but he's not really eating beans right now. He's looking for a higher fat content. So I would imagine he was probably eating acorns, and he had just bedded up in the timber. And then I think was just coming back in to make his rounds through the scrapes that evening. And we just got lucky and had snuck in there without him knowing and got in there and got away with one.
And you said that was like 6:30 p.m. your time?
Yeah.
So pretty getting close to dark for you guys. So it was.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
He was, yeah, for sure. He just got out of his bed somewhere then, but yeah,
mm-hmm.
that's absolutely amazing. Did you see? You might have said that earlier in the conversation, but did you see other deer on that hunt?
Just a couple of does came out,
yeah.
And that was it. Yeah. That was really all we saw, 2 does, and they were, I think it was a doe and a yearling, honestly. And they came out of the bedding area and just went up, and they went up into the acorn to eat. And we had seen them about 10 minutes earlier. So they were going honestly the opposite direction. They were going to him. The way he came, they went his direction about 10 minutes before. So.
Now, the spot, you mentioned it, basically it works the best on a north wind. Is that what you had said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how we set it up for that north wind to hunt it. So
and if I remember right, you said this was like almost a year to the day, wasn't it?
It was October 14th last year, and it was October 15th this year.
Yeah, and to have a north wind that a year apart is so crazy, like identical.
Yeah, it's
to make
unreal.
The story even wilder.
Yeah, to do it within a day of when we shot in the year. It's just crazy, But it goes back. I mean, we've talked before, and we talked about the field trip phase, and we've talked about some other things, and there's a lot of correlation with what deer do and how they move based off of daylight hours. There really is. And if you're OCD enough, or if you can pay enough attention to where you you pick up a deer and he moves in the area in the daylight, say November 1st. A lot of guys just dismiss it as just random deer movement, right? That day was good because of this, whatever. But we've documented like 20, 25 deer, 25 bucks over the last, 3 or 4 years on a lot of different properties. I'd say 8 or 10 different properties that have done the same thing almost to the day each year. And it may be, and that's throughout. That's some movement through July. That's some movement through the rut. It's some,
different times, periodically.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where could it be coincidence? I mean, it could, but there's also just so many tendencies that talk about daylight hours, and the only thing that's consistent from year to year is daylight hours. Food changes, weather changes, moon changes, everything else changes, but daylight hours is always the same. So I'm a firm believer that, even daylight hours can affect when does come in the cycle. I think an early doe, if she comes in early every year, she comes in within a day of the same time every year.
Right.
And I think that, those older bucks are so dang efficient at breeding and knowing that and seeking those does out that I think they understand that if this doe comes in on Halloween every year, that they go to that farm every year on Halloween while she's alive. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I honestly think that. I think that they're. Go ahead.
You there?
Yep. You hear me?
No, I was just going to say, Blake, that I think when I think about it more and more, like overall, just their lifestyle and how they live and how they survive, it's habitual, right? So it makes sense to me that habitual patterns are patterns that they're going to repeat all the time. I mean, that's what habitual is, but it's because it worked. It's because they're still alive. They know they're safe. They know they've been through there at this time and it worked. So I'm a huge believer in that too, that it doesn't just mean like, oh, they're getting ruddy, like I got a daylight mover. It means he's done that before.
Right.
I think that's a big thing that gets overlooked is he's done that before in his life. Maybe at 2 years old, 3 years old, but he's done it before.
Right. And there was a reason for it. You know what I mean? And it may be something you don't know, but it may be this doe is, close to coming in or whatever the case may be. He needs to check an area or whatever it is.
Or it could be the acorns. Like he knows those acorns drop at, that ridge at that time of year, whatever,
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some correlation with it. So, like I said, for anybody out there, I guess that's hunting a buck and had something happen to him or had an encounter with him or whatever the case may be, just, check what you had for intel and see if the buck's doing the same thing, because this deer did the same thing 2 years in a row, even after being wounded.
Yeah, which is so insane,
And it's really, it wouldn't be near as crazy if he didn't completely abandon the farm for the whole year. But he completely abandoned the farm for the whole year.
Yeah.
I don't know where, but I still have no clue where this deer went to rut.
Yeah.
But he went somewhere.
That is wild. Yeah, where'd he go for you to have which, maybe most people don't know or haven't caught on to, what I know as far as Blake and Blake's intel and the effort he puts into running cameras and managing a farm. So it's pretty insane that you had no clue where he was, no eyes on him, no neighbors talking about him, no nothing, and then boom, he shows back up. That's so wild, And even, just icing on the cake, literally you thought he was dead, maybe on the neighbor's farm or down the road a mile. You thought he was completely dead, and then boom, May 5th, here I am. That's the best surprise ever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that changed everything for me. I had one other deer in Missouri I was going to hunt besides him. And we hunted that deer for a couple of days when, because I got back. I think we started hunting on the 12th. And I had another deer that had daylighted a little bit, and another deer I'd really grown. He's a 5-year-old this year, and we've grown him, passed him a couple times at 3. Didn't ever see him at 4, but I have a ton of pictures of him through 4. Didn't really hunt him because we were trying to get him to grow and stay in this area, and then we fed him all through this winter, through this summer, and he's a great deer. He's just a hammer. But he, we hunted him for 3 days because I didn't have a north wind, and I was like, well, the only other deer I'm going to kill is this deer. So we hunted him for 3 days, and of course never had any encounters with him or anything. And then first north wind we got, we popped in on dirty and got it done. So just freaking blessed to do it. It's so cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's a wild, awesome looking rack, like it's truly his, like super unique. So, I mean, he's got some cool junk and he's got a really awesome G2 and,
yeah,
more or less, is it really split brows or is just junk under his brows? But either way, it's awesome,
Yeah.
And,
he's kind of all kinds of stuff. And he's actually been fighting. He got in a fight this last week because I got pictures of him like on the 7th. And he had that other, that 4.5, 5-inch tine. He had it then. But when we got him, and I actually took him to Dittmer's, and Dittmer caked him out yesterday, and we were caking him out, and right in the middle of his forehead, he had a puncture hole that was about, I don't know, probably 2.5 inches long, and it went all the way to the scalp, and was actually, when Dittmer was doing it, he had blood on his scalp, and Dittmer went and stuck his whole thumb through that hole. Like he had taken an antler right in the forehead, essentially and cut his whole hide right on that, the part right in between the pedicles, essentially, right in between his eyes, really,
right.
But that heavy hair part. But it just went all the way up his forehead. He cut that, and then he had that broken tine, and then his pedicles, how they get the little bird around them, or, at the base of them there. He had like 4 or 5 of those cracked, and some of them broke completely off. So he had thrown down with somebody. Really? Yeah. He got in a pretty good fight this week with another buck back there, I would imagine, probably just defended in that area.
Right.
But he was definitely on the move, kind of keeping that area locked down. So I'm really excited to see what moves in there now, because that always changes. I mean, those are things we always try to preach to guys to shoot. There's a million different hunters out there, and there's guys who don't care about management. There's guys who do care about management, and I always try to, the guys that do care about management, I always try to talk to them about just shooting age. If you just shoot age, you'll always have big deer to hunt.
Yeah.
And it's
that's right.
I've noticed that by shooting age on your farms, that's like the best thing to change the dynamic of your farms, is to kill the oldest buck on your farm. You will always have new deer show up. Your rut will always give you surprises, because guys like me we don't get surprises a lot. Like, we run so much intel and so many cameras through the entire year that like new bucks are just rare. I may pick up 3 or 4 new bucks on all the properties a year that I don't know. You know what I mean? That I haven't had a picture of. Or
that's not very many, to be honest.
No, it's not. But
that means the bucks that are in your area are really defending that turf, because, like you're alluding to, is they're the oldest.
Right. But when we kill a buck, I mean, we've even documented this. Like, we've killed a buck, and literally, we killed a buck like 3 years ago on a piece of property. I'll never forget this. He was a 5-year-old. I rattled him in October. Actually, I got the Facebook memory from him today, so it was today or yesterday, like 5 years ago. But shot the buck, rattled him in, killed him, and we have trail camera pictures. So I had a trail camera picture on the scrape, and I backed my truck up to where the trail camera was. We loaded the deer. 3 hours later, we had 3 different bucks on that scrape that we'd never seen before, ever.
3 hours later.
And I was like, it was the craziest thing. That could be a coincidence. I don't know, but it was like,
right.
And those 3 bucks stayed through the whole rut.
Did they really?
And yeah, absolutely. And there was 1 4-year-old and then 2 3-year-olds, but just bucks I had never seen before, ever, the entire year on the farm.
Wow.
And they it's like they just know, instantly. And Jeremy, even out in Kansas, has the same thing. I mean, his goal every year is just to kill the oldest bucks on the farm every year. He's like, he's like, dude, you will see a rotation that you've never seen before. Like, you will change the dynamics of your farm just by killing your oldest bucks.
Yep.
And
yeah, I mean, it's just a total analogy of sharks, circling around like a hurt fish. You know what I mean? Like, they're just they don't want to go in there yet, but
right.
When when that thing gets removed or taken out, like, and then they come in and swarm it, like see who's top dog now. But man, it's so funny. Just it's like Wildlife Kingdom. It's just so crazy the dynamics.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of guys try to lay it with, they think about like peak rut. Like if a buck's cruising, he's not going to go through that area. That's not necessarily true. When the rut, I mean, there's so many deer going every direction, and your big bucks usually are in lockdown during the rut anyway. So they're really not out just walking an area. But what you're really affecting is from really October 1st until now. You're really affecting that when they go hard horn until the peak rut. Because that's an area, that's when a buck is going to take an area and lock it down. That's why scrapes are so important late September, early October, is because he's in an area, locking that area down, putting his scrapes up, all that stuff. Once the rut happens, he's usually not home, or if he is home, he's with a doe. It's a lot harder for him to defend it, so you will see an influx in deer coming into your area in the peak rut. But what dynamic this really changes is that late September, early October time. Because if you can knock him out of there now that area, which is the best area on the farm, is wide open. So now, you're looking at either one other old deer coming from another property and locking that down until peak rut, or you're looking at just a bunch of deer just rolling through there, bucks, and it's being, kind of a free-for-all for who's going to claim that area. Either way, it proves to be more hunting, I guess, better hunting for guys through that time frame. So that's really the dynamic you're affecting is that time of the year, to where my hope is that I've got a really good 4-year-old on this farm. My hope is that 4-year-old now, because he won't go into that area. He actually has. We've noticed since we fed, and these two deer, I mean, Dirty and this 4-year-old have fed together in the summer. They were in a bachelor group together, but the 4-year-old would not. He would always wait till Dirty got done eating before he'd come into the feeder and all that. What we noticed when they split was that Dirty went north. The 4-year-old went south, and the 4-year-old's prevalent south on the south end of the farm, but he will not go north. And what we're hoping now is that with Dirty being gone, we can move that 4-year-old up into that main area of the farm and protect him.
For sure.
And keep him home and grow him. I mean, it's just a way of management and what it is. And like I said, there's guys who, I think I got in a Facebook debate like last week with a bunch of guys who don't give a crap about managing deer, and they say it's worthless and all that, and it is what it is. But man, for the guys who do manage deer, there's so much education out there for them to do, and even for us there is. I always try to keep learning and really just try to study the deer more than anything, because it's a deep process, and you can do some phenomenal things that are kind of outside the box to really help if you do it right,
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I know, I mean, it proof's in the pudding. We know there's a philosophy and it works. Well, it's guys just love to complain, and especially on social media, and they love just ultimate, like, I can't control the neighbors. No, you can't, you doofus, but you can control everything on your property. So why wouldn't you take that chance? You can control everything you do on your section, but they just refuse to do it. That's on them. Just ridiculous. Oh, yeah.
The best saying ever is, if you shoot a deer because you don't want the neighbor to shoot it, then you become that neighbor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
True. You're
like,
that
neighbor. My neighbor shoots everything. Well, if you shoot it because your neighbor won't shoot it, then you're pretty much that same guy. Like, your neighbor could be over the fence saying the same thing.
That's right. Yeah. Blaming you.
Mean, yeah, exactly. So, and you guys, neither one of you are going to have great deer hunting because you're both shooting deer to try to keep the other one from shooting deer.
Yeah, which makes no sense. But, so, I know you got Missouri boys, so you have one more tag. So, I'm pretty sure you just have one deer in mind. So, is that the game plan?
Yeah, well, I have to wait with Missouri. I have to wait till rifle season to use this tag.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm outfitting a bunch here in November, which I usually always do, which will be nice because I can actually hunt with my clients and spend some time with them. So I'm going to do that. I may make a mad dash out to Nebraska here in a week. Out to Square Shot up in northeast or northwest Nebraska. I've got an antelope tag out there, and I've also got I can get another archery tag for either whitetails or mule deer. So I may try to, if I can get that hunt put together, I may try to get out there and do that. But yeah, I mean, for the rut, as far as early rut goes here, I'm going to be home. Got some clients coming in, got some friends coming in, get them taken care of, hunt with them a little bit, just enjoy that. And then rifle, roll around. I don't know. I'm going to be really, really picky with this tag until, because in Missouri, so I have one more tag I can use, right? So I can either kill a buck with a rifle, I can kill a buck with a bow. But my rifle tag is the same tag as a muzzleloader tag. And, as you know, we did 45 acres of big-time food plots in our standing corn that just look absolutely phenomenal. Like, it's literally 45 acres of knee-high turnips right now.
Wow.
So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to be super picky with a rifle if I use a rifle tag.
Right.
And even a bow tag.
At this
point. And really, like with I really kind of want a muzzleloader hunt over some of those turnips, just because I don't think I've killed a deer with a muzzleloader in Missouri in like 5 years, and I kind of just want to. I don't know. I just kind of want to do it for some reason. So
that'd be a good time to do it. Obviously, when it gets late like that, and you have turnips. I mean, it could be awesome.
And there's really no telling what's going to show up on turnips. I mean, when you have that many turnips, if we get a cold year, I mean, we should have deer from miles, that move in that aren't really resident deer anyway. So it'll be kind of nice.
You'll be pulling deer from everywhere.
Yeah. So, and from a management standpoint for what we do, I mean, it's so hard for me to kill a deer that lives through rifle at home because they're going to get bigger. But with
they've
the
already made
it. With the situation we have now, though, late season is kind of nice because if we pick up some new deer that won't stay, some non-resident deer just move in because of the food that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you get a little bonus deer out of it. So we may end up doing that. I don't know. I think as far as my resident deer go, I'm probably not going to try to shoot another one of them unless it's just a cold deer, which I don't, it's sad, but after seeing what the shock effect and big time can do to a deer.
Yeah, you don't really have a cold deer anymore.
Yeah, you really don't. I mean, gosh, there's deer. I have 8-year-old deer that put on 30 inches this year. Like, what? So I'm at a point where I don't really feel confident with culling anything right now. So just try to kill maybe a non-resident deer that just kind of slides through will be the goal. But if not, I'll eat that tag. I don't mind doing that either, to let a deer grow another year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're in a great position, so you have a lot of options.
Yeah. I can't. By no means I'm going to be greedy. That's for sure.
You don't need to be, for sure. Yeah. That's cool. Well, good deal, and I'm sure we'll talk, but between now and your way back from Nebraska or something, but good luck if you end up going, and
thanks.
We'll talk again for sure, but super excited to have you here and talk about this deer because I knew, I was part of the story behind the scenes, so to speak, a year ago, because I know we spoke, I think the morning or night of the time you had shot it, so I was really pumped when I found out you killed this deer and was like, man, I can't wait to talk to Blake about it. So
it's super cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, super cool. So, but we'll talk soon, Blake, and if you need a one-armed guide down in Missouri to help out, just let me know, man.
Absolutely, man. You get healthy. You gotta get healthy. That's for sure.
I know it. So, but all right, man, and everybody, as you know, you can find this podcast on the Unfiltered Outdoor app and on iTunes. We'll see you guys next week.